Good morning, everybody, and we're delighted to welcome you to the first in our People series of seminars. My name is Janice Gold, and we bring in these seminars to you in conjunction with Tourism Northern Ireland. I'm delighted to have Tim Brown with me this morning. Tim and I have done a lot of work together over the years, and he's going to talk you through re-establishing your identity. People have been identified as one of the core assets of our industry, and it's important that you bring them all back. I'll now hand you over to Tim, and at the end of the seminar, we'll be happy to take questions from you. I hope you enjoy this morning's presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Janice, and welcome this morning. I did actually ask Janice, why are we using this platform rather than any other, whereby I can't actually see any of you. And I realised, of course, that here in England, we opened the hairdressers last week or the week before, and I managed to get my hair cut, whereas the rest of you haven't. So that's possibly why I'm the only person looking at myself and not at you guys, but I'm certain your hair is looking stunning. I will come back to the hairdressers later on. So this session today is about re-establishing your identity. It is part of the Road to Recovery program. And I suppose in some ways, maybe for those of you who've never met me before or seen me, I should do a quick introduction. I'm very lucky. Up until what I do now, I've never had a job longer than 6 months. That's my choice entirely. As a kid, I wanted to go to a place called RADA. RADA is a drama school. This is a terrible joke, but a true story. My parents misheard me. They thought I said Ramada, and I studied hotel management. I know it's a terrible joke and a true story. So up until now, I've run hotels, bars, restaurants, fitness, recruitment, sales, retail, parks, leisure in different parts of the world. And it must be about 20 years ago now, I noticed in the teams and the individuals I was working with, the difference between success and failure was really around the relationships that people had. I wanted to study more about that relationship and how, I suppose, the psychology of business and people within it. So I went off and studied that. I'm now doing a doctorate in clinical hypnosis, of which I'll be sharing with you nothing I know in any of the sessions I'll be running. But it is around our identity today and how we can get back into where we are. Obviously, this session is a bit of a post-COVID, but when I was speaking to Janice about putting this together, I realized that actually all the things I was looking at with working with businesses to get them back into track and getting them back reopened again was really no different to any other time I'd be working with them. You know, a company needs to have their identity. They need to know the plan. They need to engage with their staff. They need to have a focus for them. And of course, that's no different to whether you're opening a new business, whether the business is open already, or whether we have, as we are now, coming out of lockdown and having to reopen. So whilst I may not have all the answers, I'm going to be asking you lots of questions of your business, some of which you may be doing already, some of it you may not have thought about, some of which you have been doing, but maybe just need to realign themselves again. Obviously, there's a lot of nervousness at the moment. So, you know, whether that be because what's going to happen next. My sister's got a bed and breakfast. She refuses to open at weekends because she just doesn't want to have those people arrive. I mean, that was last summer. You know, the people who would be trashing hotels in Spain were trashing all the bed and breakfasts on the seafront where I live. And she didn't want them to come back. She was really happy and she could survive on a business of key workers and NHS staff who were staying in a bed and breakfast during the week. I've got other clients who last year took 3/4 of their revenue of the previous year in the time they were open. You know, and no doubt, as that was the same as some of you. You know, your August, your Septembers were possibly the best you've ever had. But the guests who were experiencing the hotel were possibly not the ones you'd ever normally have. And that in itself creates a whole different dilemma and a whole different problem. Some of which we'll be talking about today or in some of the other sessions. And that uncertainty exists again, whether you are opening a new business or that uncertainty exists if you have an existing business, because you never really know what's going to be coming around the corner. There's just a little bit more of that now than there would normally be. And as I said, I may not have all the answers, but I will be asking you lots of questions about your business. And so the 3 key areas I want to talk about in this session is, first of all, to remind yourself who you are and what does your business stand for, to reshape your business and how are you adapting your business to the changing needs, and how realistic, what is your plan B and C, and does the team know it? You can see there's a kind of pattern here. We talked about this road to recovery. So obviously every headline has a re in it, which is both cheesy and appropriate, I guess, because it is all about reopening and reshaping and reminding. So let's look first of all, I guess, at your identity. And when we do that, we need to look at, I suppose, well, the first question I always ask people whenever I work with an organization is to clarify, what business are you in? When I do this from a group point of view, and do this with your teams. Um, if you're a hotel, you're a bed and breakfast, you're a group, you're an owner, you're a manager, it makes no difference. Ask your people, what business are you in? And of course, the simple answer I always get back would be, we are in hospitality, we are in service, we are in the food business. But I think we're in more than that. And I guess my mentality around this comes from a real moral dilemma I had many years ago. I was asked by a charity called Sense to train what are called chuggers. Chuggers are charity muggers. They're the people who stand at a street corner trying to get your money for direct debit. Of course, they're also the ones that you try to pretend you're on the phone to as you walk past. So charity muggers, that's their job title, and it was a moral dilemma, because I really don't like them, but they said they'll pay me. So I thought, how do I justify that? I did train them badly. That was the only way I could do it. But I was with the group, and there's no commission for them. There was no bonuses, and I said to them, what do you do? What do you give people? And this woman who'd been there for 5 or 6 years, she was in her late 50s. She looked at me like I was an idiot, and she said, simple, me, she says, I offer people redemption. Now, I appreciate that's deep and meaningful for a Thursday morning, but actually, I really kind of got the idea of what she was trying to go out and do. She had a clear purpose and identity of what her goal was. At one point, I was doing all the sales training for Porsche, and their head office in Reading. I was working with their final resolution complaints department. The group of must have been about 25, 30 ladies. When a complaint went to the CEO, this group would then resolve those issues. And I said to them, what business are you in? What do you do? And again, a hand went up, and this lady said, we work in the restoration department. And I thought that was a really simple way of understanding what their role was, because a Porsche owner has a dream of driving that car down a Top Gear road, and that dream gets shattered, and their job is to restore that dream. So therefore, you can turn around to anybody in that department and say, is the way you answer that phone after 34 rings going to help restore that dream? No. So what could you do to restore it? How many should you pick it up after? That letter that you got sent out that had a great response, how can we get a copy to everybody? So in our business, what business are we really in? And of course, there are many different answers for that, depending on the style of business you have. And that might be, we are in the experience business, we are in the memory business, we are in the aspiration, the dream business. Maybe we're in the relaxation business, the comfort business, the convenience business. But with any of one of these words, what we're doing is that we are having an intention of what we're aiming to do. And everything we do should be in alignment with that one word or two words. I was, when I was doing some work with Marco Pierre White, he always talks about being in the great night out business. And I like that as well from a very simplistic point of view, because you can turn around to anybody, look at anybody in your restaurant and say, are they having a great night out? If the answer is no, what are you going to do to fix it? And the answer is yes, then obviously you can turn around and go, how can we duplicate that to another table? But it makes it very simple. All Star Lane's a boutique bowling alley in London. They said we're in the entertainment business, not as in song and dance necessarily, but as in, if you have somebody come to your house, you would want to entertain them, which then makes everything you do in alignment with that. So they never upsold, because if somebody had that much alcohol or drink left in a glass at home, you'd just automatically refill it. You wouldn't ask them. In the same way, they'll just go over and say, I'm assuming you'd like another glass. So it just gives you a whole different identity. So of course, that's what you were 2 years ago. And I've been doing some work with some of the hotels over here in England before they've reopened. And I was with a group last week, and I said, so what business are you in? And we came up with this long list, and things like, we're in a storytelling business, because you want your guests to go home and tell stories of where they've been, to either encourage them to come back again, or to create advocacy and other people come back in. And I said, great, that's 2 years ago. So what are we now? As of when we reopen, what business we're in, because it's going to change slightly. So we had lots of different words coming up. We're in the reassurance business, we're in the safety business, we're in the escape business, And then one individual said, we're in the recovery business. Obviously, I liked it because I had a re at the beginning of it. But I also, in my head, I kind of like evolved that very quickly as into what that meant. And I said, oh, what does it mean to you? Because I knew what it meant to me. And she said, well, we're helping our guests recover from where they've been. We're helping the economy recover by earning some money. We're helping our business recover because they need it. But more importantly, it's going to help me recover. And I guess it really summarized where your people or where you have been for the last year or last 3-4 months at least, and helping you recover back into where you're going. And I told you I'll come back to my hairdresser story. I was sitting having my hair cut, and Paul, my hairdresser, was telling me about the joy and the excitement that he'd seen in people's faces pre and post their haircut. And I thought that it's amazing, isn't it, how certain milestones there are in regarding getting back to whatever this new normal is going to look like. And actually the visual representation of you getting your hair recolored or cut or styled or whatever that might be, and you leaving that salon, just knowing that you are a little bit closer to where we would ideally like to be. And that recovery business, reinvention business perhaps, is so crucial. And they're no different for the hotels. People enjoy staying away. They like to escape. They don't want to be where they are at the moment. I had the privilege of staying a couple of nights in a hotel the other week when I was working with a customer, the client. I was the only person in the hotel other than the night porter. And it was odd because my youngest child is 14, and he said, "What was it like?" And I said, "Well, it was like a bed and a bathroom. I mean, And he looked at me and he said, "Well, of course, what did you expect?" And I went, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, with no staff, with no food, with no bar, with no offering, it's not an experience, it's just a product." And I thought, there again, how important our people are. So one of the reasons this whole program was put together is that the Northern Ireland Hotel Federation have put a bunch of information together and have been working hard from a business point of view. So this program came together also because actually the people who are going to make it happen will be your people. So this 3 sessions will look at some of the business aspects, but also about how we can re-engage in our people to make sure that they're on board with us. So there we go. Your identity gives you a purpose. It has changed post-COVID, and I really recommend you sit down with the team and you share how this works, because I think that they may not have quite thought about that yet, and how it's possibly changed in order for you to move the business on. So it's a quick way of identifying that. Your brand obviously is important, and I suppose I'd like to talk a little bit about your values. And if we look at where this all comes in order, at the end of the day, we have been focusing on surviving, focusing on our bottom lines and how we can retain our business. And so, from a very simplistic hierarchy of language, if that's the right way of putting it, we have a results, and our results are driven by our actions, and of course the actions our people deliver will be based upon the knowledge they have, but if we know people who have that right knowledge, who know what they should be doing, but they don't do it. And why not? Because the next layer down will be their attitude, which is driven by their values, which is underpinned by their identity. So when we get the identity from the previous slide, that's important, but then it's our values that really underpin all our behaviors working towards getting the results we want. And of course, if we really bear down to where we're at the moment, I suppose it almost comes down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food and shelter, which is the base level of Maslow's hierarchy, is where we've been. Can we afford the hotel? Can we afford bread on our tables? So our finances have been the core message that's been driven through our business for the last 3 or 4 months, possibly for the last year. And even last year when you were open, it was how can we get back as much as we can? Of course, above survival, food and shelter in Maslow is self-actualization and realization, and the interactivity of people and belonging. And therefore, it's around remembering what our values are that drives our business. And I'm certain whether you are a part of a brand, whether you are a standalone, whether you have a list of values that are written on a wall, whether you are an individual, an owner who has a single property, and your values are not necessarily written, but they're installed in your everyday running. Your values exist. It's just, have you been living them, and have we been working on all areas of our values throughout this period? Your staff chose to work for you for a reason. Are we still living that reason? So whatever your values might be, what's important to you needs to be reiterated, maybe not reinvented, but needs to be reiterated to make sure that your people are on board with where you're at in order for them to grow forward. Different values, different companies have different values. Maybe innovation is one of your values. How have you been innovating over the period of time to change and adapt? And of course, you have to at the moment. But how have you been communicating it? Have you been communicating that in regards to how you've been running your business and communicating to either your client base or your staff base or any stakeholders? What are the changes you've been made, and how have you been communicating? Maybe community is one of them. I've known companies who have been cooking for homeless shelters. They have been maybe doing a pop-up service for their local community. They have, and within that, with every one meal that's been sold, one meal's gone to, or sorry, every 10 meals that have been sold, one has gone to a homeless, so that they've been linking any offering they've been doing to supporting local community. It might just be the fact that they have been looking after their community generally by being there and open and providing a service. Maybe they are a community to their staff and what their staff have been allowed to do during lockdown. But again, the key thing for me is, what have you been doing about communicating that so that your people feel that they are belonging to something, that you have still been true to your beliefs, yourself, and how have you been communicating that to your stakeholders through any social media platform that you may have, um, or maybe through emails or any other newsletter-based communication you have, even just updating your website. Um, my my eldest son decided that he couldn't believe how few websites for local businesses had any COVID updates on them. So he took it upon himself, and he was sending out a letter with a pair of glasses in it, and with a note saying, "I've had a look and I think your site needs improving." I don't know where he gets his cheese from, but it was around, what are we doing to make sure that we are updating our information so people know what's going on, which is part of that community action. If one of your values is experience, how are we sharing what our next experiences are going to be for our guests? Maybe you even shared your experience that you've had over this lockdown, maybe what you've done to the property, maybe through some form of refurbishment or renovation. And so we're constantly looking at how we can improve. And I think of other words that people have got as part of their value sets. And I went through different hotel groups and looked at their values recently, and things like connected, fun, all these other different words, quality, that are out there as a set of values, but what are we doing to deliver them, and how are we still maintaining that during lockdown? From a very simplistic point of view, if we just look at the profit chain, for those of you who don't know what the profit chain is, obviously the idea of a business to make profit, the way you make profit is obviously by having happy customers. Happy customers are happy because your people did the right thing at the right time, so your standards are right. And of course, I gave the clue to the final one, or the first one, should I say, which is the people who do the standards are your people. So employment engagement means that people are happy. Happy people follow the right instructions, they do the right standards, they even impress and exceed. Happy customers mean that they then spend money. And of course, at the moment, we've spent so much time looking at profit. Have we been spending time looking at our service standards and how we can reinvent them? Have we been looking at our customers, so in experience, they can have the standards that are going to make that experience happen? And of course, let's start again right at the beginning at our start. And I appreciate that, one of the issues we have at the moment is a lot of you possibly laid off some of your staff, or some of your staff, or all of them, and didn't use some of the furlough that could have been available, and that's completely acceptable. And now we're having to recruit. I see this morning that Pizza Express are looking for 1,000 staff. But since we've got to be fortunate with that respect, since I think the percentage of unemployment is greater amongst the 18 to 25 to 30-year-olds. So there's lots of young talent doing many different other things who are just hungry to come back and do something. So again, make you be aware of, are you the place that people want to be? You know, we'll talk about scoreboarding in one of the later sessions, but you know, to have a goal for our profit is straightforward and simple, but we also need to have some form of dashboard or KPI for our service, our standards, and more importantly, our employment engagement, because if we can get that bit right, the rest of it flows, as our values are. So reminding people of your brand is really important, as it would be your customer. So let's talk about reshaping your business. What's the COVID way going to be? And it's interesting. So again, if I'm sitting with a client with a new property, I would sit there and I'll say, okay, what does your business meant to look like, etc., etc. And of course, it's no different now to COVID. It's just obviously there are COVID ways. I'm not here to tell you about what all the regs are. I will ask you to make sure you know what the regs are, though. So my eldest son went for a job interview at a local restaurant that's doing delivering pizzas 3 nights a week, and he was sitting there, and the owner said, "Well, the thing is, Sam," he said, "I'm not entirely sure, you know, when things are going to get back to normal. So I don't know when we're going to have like a steady rota for you." He said, "You know, I don't know when we're allowed to sell to people, you know, in the restaurant." And Sam went, the 12th of April. And he went, "What's that?" He said, "Well, that's when you can serve people outside." And James went, "Can you?" And then turned around to his bar manager and said, "Is that really the case?" And he went, "Yes." And then he said, "Well, when can we serve people inside?" And my son then went, 17th of May. And the owner didn't actually know, which might mean he probably shouldn't get a job there, to be honest. But it is around the idea of make sure you take some ownership over the information that's being given and know what's going on, because I think that's going to be one of the most crucial parts of reshaping our business in the future, of how, what, where, and why. And I think when we look at that reshaping of the business, it's going to be, what are the touch points that we had in the past that were our selling point, and where are they going to change? And in fact, you know, I say to people quite often that, you know, I said it to them last year, right at when we had our first lockdown, what a fantastic opportunity for you to have version 2. So whatever your property is, it's now version 2, and it's now possibly version 3, even maybe version 4 of that. How's that going to look different to how it was before? It is a time to reinvent if you need to or want to, because there will be a gap. Your customer base will be different. Your offering will have to be different to some extent. And because of that, how can we change it? I was doing work at a local hospice, and they've changed the way that you can't go through the front door. The doors are shut, and somebody comes to you. And their receptionist, I said to them, I said, "This is fantastic for you, because you're now something crucial to the organisation." And she looked at me like I was stupid, like I don't know, most people do, because I get excited about little things. And I said, before we'd have to come, you know, somebody would come in and they'd have to come up to you. Whereas now you're being so much more proactive, and that you are waiting for the security gate to open. You're now coming out and greeting me at the door, not as a porter, not as a gatekeeper, but actually as a host and a welcome warmness that didn't exist before. I'd come in and I wouldn't know where I am or where I was going, but now I've got a friendly face, be it behind a mask, to welcome me, to now guide me into what happens next. And I think that was like a really interesting way of changing their business model to meet, you know, the guidelines, but more importantly, how can we maximize that? So, you know, if that means that your booking system suddenly goes on an iPad rather than a reception desk, so you can maybe approach people in a different way, if that means that you do still have to have a desk, but maybe you have a wider range and more information to communicate to people what's going on, your role has now changed slightly. And so making those key impact areas, be that reception or the presentation of a menu, be that on a QR code or a virtual menu, or maybe a blackboard that you're holding so that they don't have to keep interacting, because everything will be different, but it gives you a chance to interact in a different way. It gives you maybe more time to spend with them, and therefore that experience will be even better. You know, it's also how your role of responsibility of your staff has also changed. You know, 2 years ago, your cleaning and housekeeping team would barely, maybe even want to be seen. And now, I spoke to one hotel manager who wanted to put them in high-vis jackets, because they're now the most important people in the hotel, because they're the ones that are going to give your customers perhaps the greatest reassurance. Um, you always cleared down a table between the sittings in the restaurant. Now you're going to let people know you're doing it as a as an affirmation of what your role is. Um, uh, some of you got fogging machines. Who knows if they really work? Got another client. He just walks through the hotel on a periodic basis, just fogging. Whether it works or not, it's telling customers that something's happening and they care and they're doing something about it. It's that whole piece that if you are now in the reassurance business, what are you doing to reassure your customers that they are safe within your surroundings and environment in which you're in? But I think it's going back to your version 2. Revisit your SOPs, your standards, revisit them with your staff. From a training point of view, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you have a great opportunity, and it is so exciting what you can do to move the business forward. It is an opportunity to shine, because your interactivity may be behind a glass, but actually it's still about people. We have always and always will be in a people business. And while some of it might be digitalized, the interaction we have will be so much more precious when we have it. So I think that piece is really important. So revisit your standard operating procedures, which I'm assuming you have, that they are in line with your values and you're delivering them with a sense of purpose. So your reshaping your business is only going to happen with your people. I'll start this story. So I was asked to pitch some work to a contract agent company. They have 150 sites, only 20 of them are open at the moment, and they have an exec chef team. And they asked me if I could do some presentation skills for the exec chef team, because obviously all their sales pitches are now on Zoom, and chefs are always the most natural presenters, really comfortable and confident, and could I give them a guidance? So I said, of course I can. So, we talked about what we could be doing. And there were two bits out of it I found fascinating. The first one was I said to them, well, we could do food demos. You're doing any food demos at the moment? They go, well, it's quite hard to set up. I said, well, it's quite straightforward. I can provide a box of kit that you can put up in a kitchen, being at home or in an office, and a couple of cameras, some lighting, microphone, and mixing desk. Quite straightforward, easy to operate, and you can go ahead. Because I then said, what's really good about it is you can then start doing menu briefings for your staff. And there was a pause and a silence, and I said, you are communicating with your staff. And there was a pause and there was a silence, and I went, you aren't just expecting them to turn up when you reopen and know exactly what's going on, are you? And there was like the board of directors were just like looking at me going, yeah, that's what we've done. Now, I've spoken to some of the people who are on this seminar at the moment, and I know that you've been fantastic. Some of you might be sitting there looking a bit guilty. And by the way, I completely understand it. You've been trying to survive your own business. I know lots of you have got other people who've been looking after the people, which makes it easier. But yeah, your people, where have they been? They've lost their identity. And it's your job to help them recover that in that respect. So engage in them. And what was interesting, the other thing about this program was, they said, well, what we do, we'll do a meeting and you can present what you're going to be doing with them. And I went, well, we could do that. Or maybe what we could do is ask them what they need, ask them where they want to go with it, and let them be part of that process. One of the problems with lockdown is that whether we have been following the guidelines or not, we have been given instructions and restrictions for the last year. Those restrictions are going to carry on to some extent or another, but we are going to be given some freedom. In my opinion, if we can engage in our people and get their buy-in, they are the ones who are going to be on the shop floor. They are the ones who are used to doing the service. Let's involve them in the whole process. And from a furlough, if those of you who've got furloughed staff, you can do that without having to worry about paying them, because they're being paid because they're on furlough, and they can do it because that's part of the scheme. You can do training whilst they're on furlough, and so engage them in that process to let them empower them to where the business and where you want them to take them. And remember, Your staff, your people are customers too. Let's find out what their expectations are. They will have expectations of what work will look like, how it will work, how things should work, and we need to be mindful that they are the experts of their trade. So what can we do to make sure that they feel part of that process? And they probably got some great answers that maybe even you wouldn't have. You're so in it, you need to be out of it to see in it. And I think there's a possibility that they may already have imagined how things might be or not. And for, in my opinion, to spend some time with them as a workshop just to get that momentum going back in again to move them forward. I think that's a crucial part. So reshaping your business is around your review of any SOPs. It's also about reshaping your business by using your people to enable you to do that. They're the ones who are going to be delivering it, to make sure that they've got the buy-in by empowering them and asking the right question. And that might be done by department, it might be done by property, but they are crucial. They're the greatest asset we have. They're the only asset they appreciate. So let's make sure we use them. We need to be realistic, and when it comes to our expectations, how does that fit into the mindset? So I keep talking about, for those who've met me before, I keep talking about writing a book, and lockdowns give me an opportunity to get a lot of my thoughts on paper. If I could ever get the book title, it would be called Mind the Gap. It's a really happy book. It's a gap between, originally it was a gap between where we thought we wanted our life to be and the reality of where it actually is, and it's what we fill that gap with. When it comes to lockdown, how relevant is that? Because that could be the gap between waking up in the morning and going to bed at night, and what we fill that gap with. But in life, it could be many different things. From a midlife crisis point of view, it's the gap between where we thought we wanted to be in reality, and we fill that gap with a new car, maybe an anxiety, maybe an addiction, going to the gym, or a substance. Maybe in a relationship, it's your expectation is your partner should be home at this time, they come home at that time, and what that gap's filled with dinner in the bin, and maybe an argument. From the context of employees, your staff will have an expectation of you of this, and you deliver this. That gap is filled with sabotage and resignation. And of course, let's do it the other way around. You have an expectation of this, and they deliver this. You're going to fill that with hopefully disciplinary before you sack them, or maybe even coaching before you can get to disciplinary. So there's gaps absolutely everywhere, and of course there are going to be so many gaps when it comes to communicating the expectations of our guests. So we need to be mindful of that gap, and there's going to be a gap everywhere. There's going to be a gap in your supply chain. There's going to be a gap in the budget. There's going to be a gap in finances. There's going to be a gap in your staff's expectation. If you ask me, without buying the book, what the simple solutions are, or the simple awarenesses are, it is quite straightforward to me. Number one is you need to be more flexible around your expectations. So what are your plan B and C's? What are your what ifs? And if we can have a strategy whereby this is what we want to achieve, if things don't go to that, how do we work accordingly? So we need to be more flexible around our expectations. I know you're going to have bills to pay, you're going to have a certain amount you have to. That's not what I'm talking about. It's how we deliver it. We need to be flexible on. We need to be much more acknowledging and accepting of the reality of where we are at. We can't keep fighting it, which is some of us have been doing for the last year. We need to accept where we're at, and that might be we're in a good or bad place, how many people we've got, how are we going to operate, accept where we're at. But I think the most important bit of all is the communicating the gap and communicating the difference, because people don't know necessarily. I mean, how can you meet someone's expectations if you don't know what they are? So it's really important for you to spend that time with your client base and with your staff base to find out what their expectations are. Now, you may not be able to meet it, but by having the understanding of what their expectations are, you can communicate whether you can or can't manage to deliver on that promise. I think when it comes to that gap regarding, I put on the screen there, mind the gap and be flexible over budgeting. Your income source will be different to normal. Where you might have been reliant on rooms or F&B, that's going to shift somewhat. Think about how we can maximize any opportunity Some of you have got outdoor seating, some of you haven't. And in that respect, you'll be missing out on some form of business as the changes, between the two different dates occur and how you get back to normality. So there'll be a need for you to be flexible on that budgeting. You know, I've always found it funny when you look at previous years, you can't ever really budget on a previous year, and this year's going to be even worse on that because you're going to have no idea what you can expect. You're going to be taking what you can when you can. I knew clients who took 4 times their August income with half the staff. They know they can do it now. They know they're not going to do it again, and they know their staff aren't going to do it again. But they try and get away from it for a while. But I think it's very much important about thinking about how flexible are you around how and where the income's going to be coming from. And finally, on there, I put, have a plan B or C, because what is fantastic about this is that we are now looking at our properties and our businesses and going, how and where can we service the people who want to come out, who want to experience something, who want to be away from home? And what can we do to make sure that we maximize that? I think that's going to be a really, really crucial piece around having a plan B or C. So again, ask your people, engage in your team, because they're possibly going to be the ones with the answers. I think what's important about that is therefore thinking about your people, because they're the ones who are going to be delivering it. And are you focusing on your champions or on your saboteurs? Somebody once told me these figures, and they said to me, I don't know where these figures come from, but they make sense, and I'm going to share that rationalization of these figures as well. In any team, 5% of your team are saboteurs, 25% of them are champions, and 70% of them swing either way. Interestingly, how much time or which group of those people do we spend most of our time and effort on? Most people will spend it on the 5%, the saboteurs. They're the ones that drain our energy. They're the ones that aren't doing what we expected them to do, and we spend our time trying to get them to be right. Who should we be spending that time with? It should be with the 25%. The 25% are our champions. They're the ones that follow our instructions, who are happy and glad to be there. The 70% will swing either way. So if you're giving a mixed message, which tends to happen to the 5%, because you're telling them what they're not doing right, you therefore will confuse the rest of them. A great example, my son had an email from one of his teachers from school, when he was home learning, now we've started our GCSE content, you need to start doing some work. And he's been getting really great grades and has had emails from her saying that he's been working really hard. I had to explain to him that email came out and does directed towards the 5% and not the 25% that at least I hope he's part of. But his morale suddenly dropped. So when you start communicating to the 5%, the morale shifts. So you will know who those people are in your group. Don't pay lip service to them necessarily. Don't speak to everybody as if they are the 5. Speak to the champions. The 70% will swing towards the champions because they're the ones who are getting the recognition and the reward. So when you're speaking to your team around their expectations, engage with those champions and everybody else will follow along. And it's like opening a new business. So if you are opening a new business, what would you be doing with your team? You would be letting them know what your expectations are and laying it out quite clearly. Your team have spent however long away from the hotel or the operation. To expect them to come back into it with a clear knowledge and identity of what they're meant to be doing in my head is foolish. So it therefore giving you a huge opportunity to act as if you are opening a new business. You can have your version 2. You can review your standard operating procedures. You can engage in your team around what you can do to deliver that expectation. And from that, we can then move forward to make sure that we're celebrating the success of those who are delivering it. And that expectation, that gap theory, is going to be, I think, one of the most important things when we come back to it, because everyone would have a different gap of what they've been going through over the last year. You have had your own, but you know that you can't get through the next few months without your people. So, the summary to the 3 key areas we talked about, having your identity is so crucial, Because without your identity, you have no values. Without the values, you don't have the idea of the knowledge or the SOPs, the manuals that you need to deliver on, and then you won't get the results. And like any other business right now, we want to get those results in as quickly as possible. Saving our business to make sure that we're not damaging it. Your business will not be the same as it was. It will be different. Your service levels will be different. And you're going to take a hit on TripAdvisor, and you're going to take a hit on your customer service metrics, just by the fact that you won't be able to deliver to the masses that will just be suddenly appearing on your doorstep. When I say that, that's what I'm hoping, because the experience I've had over here has been that way. So I'm hoping exactly it's going to be over there. So that was really my session for today, talking about your being realistic, about re-identity and about reshaping. So now I think I'm going to invite Janice back in. I think we've got some questions hopefully coming back out to us. And Janice, are you there? I like technology when it works. Janice, we can't hear you, but we will do in a minute. I think I might surprise Janice. I said we have to be adaptable and manage our expectations. It might just be me doing questions.
There we go. I'm back.
Oh,
Sorry,
hey.
just takes a minute to come on board here, which is good. So we're all back and up and running again. I hope you all enjoyed that. We've had a couple of questions, and Tim and I had a bit of a chat beforehand. So one of the questions that we had prior to the session was, do we think aspects of COVID-19 will be with us forever? And one of them was around social distancing. And just to give you a little bit of background on that, the current regulations in social distancing when we open will be 2 meters apart, or if that's not possible, 1 meter with mitigation. The actual mitigations aren't specifically outlined, but they are really back to back with screens, with face masks and things like that in the middle of them. There is a large piece of work taking place in the UK and England at the moment with 4 streams, of which social distancing is one. And the thoughts are that when those streams are put together and when the findings are come to the fore, they will be integrated into legislation in England, and that will pass on to the devolved states. But that's just the background. But I asked him now, do you think parts of this, do you think social distancing is with us for a while?
I think that, well, I remember speaking to one of the clients last year, and I said, so how are the guests? And he said there's a big difference between those guests who think this is a real thing and those that don't. I think there will be a need for mindfulness and education in the properties. I think that can be quite evident by the fact that, you put salt and pepper on your tables, you're going to put hand sanitizer. There will be constant reminders in and around the operation to remind your guests that this is not necessarily normal. There will be certain amounts of social distancing that will occur where the mask will need to be worn in certain areas. That's going to be quite a cultural thing, because we're seeing different countries around the world having different legislation on that. But I think that there will be certain things we need to be mindful of in the future, and also, if nothing else, to reassure our guests that they feel safe. Does that make sense, Janice?
Yeah, perfectly. Just one thing I forgot to say, we're going to send out a couple of questionnaires to people on the seminar. So they will be sent out now, and if you could fill them in, that would be great. Tim and I will kind of continue down through the questions, but if you're able to fill them in when you're on, we'd really appreciate it. So they'll come up on your screen. So if you're able to do them, that would be great. We'll be able to feedback on those and hopefully address any queries that you have. So the next question is, any tips on reuniting furlough workers this time, as it was tricky the last time? Tim, I'll pass that over to you in the first instance, bringing really what maybe are, and for some people, 3 teams: the team that they had on furlough, the team that have been working, and any new people they're bringing into their business. How would you recommend bringing them back together again?
So we're going to cover this in maybe some of the other sessions, but right now, one of the things I've been doing with companies over here is getting those people together and almost having an open heart of where their lives have been. It's been amazing listening to people's stories about how their year has been, and actually getting them on board is about finding out where they have been to move them forward. Um, you know, that some of them have been struggling, some of them haven't. Some of them have, I was talking about the idea that there's, going back to the read, there's a resentment for people who have been working for the people who haven't, and a resentment, believe it or not, for the people who haven't been working for the people who have, because they've had no sense of identity, nothing to get up for. Some of them have gone out and found other jobs and found things to do, but there's a lot of people who have had a huge void in their lives and a huge gap. And I think, so for me, it's around the idea of finding out that, very much that being interested. If you're interested in them, they're going to be interested in you. And so, reuniting is, I use the word team activities. It's getting to understand your team, using that identity we talked about right in the first section, about helping them understand what they're coming back to, and also managing what their expectations are to then move forward.
Okay. I mean, we've seen a few people do quite interesting things. We've seen people bring their staff together and do a particular task, be it, making an Easter egg, putting them all together, running a bit of a competition, which has worked quite well. Some people maybe at this stage are slightly weary of those things, but other people we have a list of free courses that people can go on. Some of them being sort of, around mindfulness, around yoga and stuff like that, which have been quite good. Other people have bought, if they've gardens, their staff back into their garden to maybe help with gardening, look at repruning things, maybe do some work with a local hospice or with a local old people's home. And they've brought those teams in and they've tried to mix in maybe one person who's been working, one person who's been on furlough, and maybe a new recruit. Many of you will have seen that we did a survey with the hotel sector, and they estimated that they needed about 2,500 new people to come into the business. So 2,500 people is really roughly 20 people per hotel. Some hotels obviously need quite a lot more, and we've a few changes. So it is quite good sort of to see that. One question we've been asked about is, how do you give your customers confidence in that they're coming back to a hospitality experience? And what would you say around that, Tim?
Number one is they're desperate to come back. So anything that is not home is an advantage. The second thing is how we frame their experience, from your website to the booking to the end result. If I compare it to different industries, Janice, so I recommended to a friend of mine as a head teacher. So they videoed the school and how that looked differently when they first came back in September, so that the kids weren't going to be frightened or shocked, and therefore the parents were also reassured. Now, I'm not necessarily do a virtual tour of the hotel, but why not? Because actually letting people know what things are going to look like manages their expectation, so that when they do turn up, it's not going to be a big shock. There might be a simple list of do's and don'ts that have to happen around the hotel that they are not used to having. But also, as I said, going back to having a hand sanitizer next to your cruet set, salt and pepper on the table, it's those little telltales or the fogging machine walking through the hotel every now and again, that say these things are different, we are in the right job. Housekeepers are suddenly going to have to be visual and represented and communicative, and actually be really proud. They're going to be the most important people in the hotel. I'm not saying they never were, but they've never been shown in that light before. And I think that from a guest point of view, it's our job to educate and to highlight what we're doing on a day-to-day to reassure them where they're going to be staying in a safe environment.
Yeah, it's very good. I mean, we've had a lot of talk about housekeepers. As you know, housekeepers have always been, I've always had great admiration for them with my inability to make a bed, or make a bed well, I think would be a better way of putting it.
And that's a really good team building exercise, by the way.
Yes, we tried it. I was very poor, and didn't improve even after many years in boarding school.
Hospital corners.
Hospital corners, very, very challenging. But we've seen a lot of people make videos which have gone down really well, and people have shared them. We've seen a lot of them over the last couple of days, a number of very entertaining ones, people out maybe playing on their golf course, introducing you to your housekeeper or your head housekeeper. And those things are important, and important in two ways. One, important for your customer, but secondly, will let people who are maybe thinking of coming to work for you, of the roles that you have. And I think that that's the thing that we've seen quite a lot of people do, that they've kind of joined those two aspects of it together and said, oh, well, if that person's enjoying themselves, that must be very good. I suppose the other thing is you've done a lot of work with us on branding in the past, and we've done quite a bit both with you and other people. And I think people often think that branding is something, you know, that only Coca-Cola have. And we've sort of encouraged people, you know, how would you say to somebody to just, you know, go back to your brand, go back to those basics? What's a really simple 5-minute exercise that you can engage your team in?
So one that I'll often do is you know, you mentioned Coca-Cola, Janice. People are familiar with the brands that are on our high street. So one of the questions I often ask is, you know, if you were a car, what car would you be and why? If you know, so from a product point of view, you know, are you a Ford Mondeo or are you a Range Rover Sport? What are you trying to be even? So maybe you even have a gap there of saying, you know, 2019, what were we? 2021, what do we aim to be? So from a service point of view, what shop are you? You know, what style of service are you meant to be delivering? Is it a more hands-on or is it stand back? Where do we want to be from a service point of view? So what car, what shop? And the other one I do is if you were to add, you know, we talk about the identity, and you know, I like these ideas, these videos, but if you were to use a celebrity to highlight who would represent you from a brand point of view, which would it be? And of course, you know, the teams acknowledge and accept that these brands and these celebrities as individuals, and they can identify with it. They can't always identify with your property, but when you start linking these names and these words with your property, it makes sense. And it also helps you clear up. You know, I remember opening up a 3-star hotel once with a brand, and they, you know, the staff said, we're a Ferrari, and you're going like, you're not really, are you? You know, you're a Ford Focus. At the end of the day, you can be a Focus ST. I don't mind bells and whistles, but you're not going to be a Ferrari. So it helps from an organization point of view to layer that more appropriately as well. So, you know, mind the gap. It's about managing expectations, and the staff might think they're beginning here, but actually we're just trying to deliver here. Let's try and deliver that really, really well. So that's a really simple game, Janice, to get the team to acknowledge and recognize. On the whole, when I do it with companies, there's a similarity between them, except when it comes to celebrity, and then it kind of like goes off a scale. But that's because age and preference and all kinds of other different demographics that choose different people. But the underlying characteristics of the car, the shop, and the celebrity, you know, if take away what car it is, the underlying is often very similar. So it's a great way of creating an alignment and a quick game that actually is much more powerful. And you know, I talked before about asking, not just telling. So asking your people rather than just telling this is what we are, actually asking them what they think actually gives you a better buy-in, a better understanding.
Well, that's very good. Thank you, Tim. I mean, those are a great number of tips. If you just want to move on to the final slide there, Tim, we have a number of other workshops that are coming up over the course of next week. We have Tim will be joining us again next Wednesday to looking at re-engaging with your stakeholders. Again, very similar idea. We'll go down through the details of it. And then we will also be looking at on Thursday about re-energizing your business to maximize your opportunities. And those are the 3 seminars in the People series. At the end of this, we will share through Patricia, for people who attended the seminar, a short kind of synopsis of things which you can reference, which will be good for you. And then the following week, we're doing a piece on sales on the 5th of May. We'll hopefully have a better idea of what markets we can actually promote to at that time. And we look forward to seeing you all then. I'd just like to say thank you to all of you who attended. I hope you enjoyed this morning, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.